All right.
That's a fancy opening there.
Well, thank you.
I felt
Thank
like I
you.
was on an Indiana Jones movie. That was pretty cool.
Thank you to Joel who put that together. The intro, it gets the blood flowing.
Yeah.
I really
It's
enjoyed
high
that
energy.
intro.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Little shout out for Joel.
All right. Hey, everyone. This is the David Washington Show, and we are broadcasting from the Oxford, as you see, the Oxford Secret Society. The Oxford Sports Pub and Secret Society here in Altamont Springs. And with me today is my very special guest, Isabella Johnston.
Thank you.
She
That Chicago slang didn't slip in there.
exactly.
Yeah.
I made sure that I pronunciate as well as I could.
You did awesome.
Thank you, Isabella Johnston, of Employers for Change. She is the founder and CEO of Employers for Change, and Employers for Change, among other things, and we'll get to. Employers for Change is about diversity, equity, inclusion in the workplace.
Yes, and it's all based on cognitive skills, which is in your head, and we also help match cognitive skills and also shared mutual causes. So we reduce employer bias and increase diversity based on those variables instead of what we see on the outside. It's what's on the inside.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Great.
thanks.
Tell us a little bit more about Isabella the person.
Okay, that's a pretty broad open question. So I know we're 30 minutes, so I'm going to give a shorter
How,
version of it.
you could take as long as you want.
Maybe. So my background is in education. I used to be a public classroom teacher.
Correct.
I taught middle and high school English in Seminole County here. I also taught at risk as well as standard, which is regular students, and then honors level. The only thing I didn't teach was gifted. You have to have a certificate for that.
Mhm.
So I taught there for 11 years. I got an MBA. I graduated from Rollins College with an English degree, went back to school, got an MBA from Belhaven. Little shout outs for all those schools. And then I went on to pursue a PhD. I do
Right.
not have it still yet, but
Okay.
I'm all but dissertation for it. So I took the test, passed the exam, and all of the coursework. And that is in leadership development and human resource development, which is basically training and learning. So my whole life has been in education. After I got the MBA, I started teaching as an adjunct professor at a lot of schools, including my school, Rollins College. And I've also taken a certificate in nonprofit management. So I've worked in nonprofit parallel to education and starting my own business. They've all been this one track of a lot of years, over 20 years in education, nonprofit, and also entrepreneurship.
Excellent. And also,
I'm going to give a little shout out. David was a guest on my
that's
podcast,
where I was going.
The
Yes.
Intern Whisperer, where we
Yes.
talk about your career path and also the future of work. What is 2030 going to look like?
I remember that.
Yeah.
That was
Great guest. Everybody should go to the Intern Whisperer and go and listen or watch David's episode on our Employers for Change YouTube channel, or also over on it streams from over 20 podcast distribution channels.
Wow. And I was going to mention that you are the host of the Intern Whisperer,
Mhm.
and that you have a wide variety of guests.
Oh, we do.
And I will listen to, the other podcasts. One of my favorites was with JJ Walcott.
Oh, she was amazing.
She was.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to tell you, I just recorded 2 shows this week, and they're going to be coming out towards middle, end of May. And one is John Chin, and he wrote a book called Engaging Virtual Meetings. Ooh. This guy used to work for Microsoft. He's incredible. He is well connected, like super, super connected. He invited me to an event that's coming up, and it's for people that are in podcasting. So he said I can invite somebody. I will invite you.
Well, thank you,
Yeah.
Isabella.
And these
appreciate
have
it.
really high profile guests at
Okay.
this, and it's a pay your own dinner, but it is going to be a dinner, and it is coming up in June, I believe.
Okay, great.
So I'll send you an invite, and Joel, not leaving Joel out. just so you know. Whatever.
Joe's
He's over there being real
immersed.
quiet. Like,
He's immersed in the project right now on his laptop.
I can tell. Yeah.
Isabella, is this event specific to podcasting or?
No, he's actually he's on a speaking circuit,
Okay.
and so I'm getting on speaking circuits also, and it's
Excellent.
there for people that want to be like keynote speakers. If you want to be a speaker at conferences, so I'm working towards that, and I also made a list of TEDx events that I'd like to go and speak at.
Great.
So I told him I was going to share that list with him. He wants to go and do that also. So,
Okay.
yeah.
I saw you speak at Podfest Expo.
Yes,
earlier
the
this year.
Pachaka. Yeah.
And I must admit that it was an excellent experience. I am glad that you let me and Joel know about it, and I am sure that we will be there next year. It was a great experience.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
I enjoy watching you
Thank you.
give your presentation and some of the others, but it was very good, very good.
Just so our listeners and viewers know what a pachakacha is, that is a Japanese word for chit chat.
Mhm.
Some people pronounce it pechakucha, which is not the way you're supposed to say it. It's supposed to be pachakacha. And it is there a less than 5-minute talk. You have 20 seconds per slide. There are no words on the slides. You have to tell a story, and it moves 20 seconds, whether you have finished what you were going to say
That's
or
right.
not. And so when we did Podfest, we only had 15 seconds
Right.
per slide, and you get 20 slides, and that's it. So it was a lot. And then I found out, I'm just going to share with the listeners and viewers, that everybody else was doing it about podfesting or about podcasting. Sorry.
Right.
And I went, well, I was talking about the future of work. And I thought, I did not build my talk around the fact that the future of work and podcasting. And so I was pivoting last minute.
Right. I remember you and I taking some time
know what?
beforehand.
I don't know if you
going
still have
through-
that video. I need it because I don't have it.
You never got it?
I couldn't get it to download.
Oh no.
That's okay. Don't worry about it.
I'll make a mental note to go back
yeah.
and,
I forgot
and
to
find
ask
it.
you. Yeah.
But
You might still have it.
I hope I do.
Yeah.
I once in a while I'll go and clear out,
I do that
stuff,
too.
but I'll double check. Wow. And you're right. You focus on the future of work, and
Mhm.
most of the individuals who were presenting talked about podcasting and things like
Yeah.
that. And there were about maybe 25, 30 presenters.
Yeah, about 30. Close to.
So what you talked about was nice because it was fast paced. There were a lot of people.
Yeah.
It was in a small, crowded room.
Yes, it was full. It was packed.
Right. And so it was a nice what's the word I'm looking for?
It was a nice mix of topics.
A nice mix of topics.
That's what I
However,
thought it was, yeah.
it was a nice step away from the podcasting conversation to something else that was, I thought just as relevant, and
Mm-hmm.
it was enjoyable. I hope they do bring that back.
Oh, they
How
do
is
it every year.
Every year.
Yeah. Pachakacha.
Pachakacha.
I had to practice for a long time.
Pachakacha.
I think John knows how to say it. He's saying no. And just so our audience knows, John is the guy that's also recording all of this and making sure we sound great.
John, our wonderful producer. Yes.
I gave you a shout out, John.
Pachakacha.
Yeah, you got it. It's perfect.
Voila.
Yeah.
It just kind of flows.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll be back. I like being behind the scenes like we were this year, volunteering again. And now that we know what to expect and what to do, maybe do a little bit more. But that was a good
There's
experience.
more than just those conferences. So I've started picking up a lot more, and I'll share them with you. There's a lot of conferences that are coming up that are always in podcasting. The podcast community is very, very collaborative, if you
Mhm.
will. And so this one that just happened, I can't think of the name right now. It was in California, or
Okay.
maybe it's coming up. And yeah, I think it's coming up because Alex had said that it was coming up. And that's a guy that has another company that's geared around podcasting.
Okay.
Anyway, when you get on those circuits and you can go and present at different places, you reach different audiences because not everybody
Right.
goes to Podfest. They go to different ones. So really nice to know who the influencers are in that particular industry.
Good point.
I really do want to go higher in podcasting. Our show
Okay.
hit, we just hit 11,400 downloads.
Excellent.
And,
Congratulations.
thank you. We're really working to hit 20,000 by the end of this year. So,
I want to talk about the speaking engagements and you
Mhm.
becoming this, a speaker. But before I get to that, the podcasting, how long have you been doing the podcasting?
oh, yeah. I've been doing my show for 5 years. This is season
Okay.
6. So, this is year 6 that we're going through. And I always try to find guests that are eclectic in their industries.
Mhm.
I like to have, as I mentioned, futurists, thought leaders, CEOs, and HR professionals, and you fell under CEOs. I haven't had a lot of people talk about politics and being a
Okay.
political consultant, so that was really interesting.
Okay.
And it reaches different demographics in our audience.
Right.
We have a lot of focus, even more so now. Larry Roberts, who you may remember him from Podfest,
Yes.
he talked about Chat GPT, and that's what we
Right.
talked about on the show. So his episode, I recorded it actually aired this week.
Okay.
Yeah.
I believe I saw that. It's in
Mhm.
my queue to
Yeah.
listen to.
Really good, really good. You'll learn a lot about Larry. He actually disclosed a lot of very personal information that
Okay.
he's very open about
Okay.
now. Um, just so if our guests want to know, look for Larry Roberts on the Intern Whisperer. But he had really good stories. He used to be a stand-up comic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All
fun
right.
things.
That helps.
Fun things about him. Yeah, really cool. So the other guest that was on my show, I have to sit here and think because I always line them all up. Oh, this one, not. It was 2 weeks ago. Wendy Austin.
Okay.
She's with First Robotics. We talked about robots,
Really?
and that was one of my favorite episodes. So good. We laughed so hard because she was also an actress at one time, and she
Okay.
did hand modeling. And so we talked about that. We talked about kids like preschool kids
Okay.
learning how to build robots all the way up to college age.
Oh, wow.
It's just really, really interesting. I have very diverse amounts of representation there from men and women. We've had people talking more about meta, what is meta, where this year in 2023, I'm focusing on finance, on game industry and communications. So there's
Okay.
a lot more people in podcasting on my show right now. Getting more people about finance coming in and talking about that as an industry. What's it going to look like? And then also in the game industry. And one of my guests at the end of last year was Miriam. She created a platform that kids can build simple games
Okay.
with no code.
Really?
And so one of the things that we were talking about even yesterday off the air, and this gentleman's I'm not going to disclose his name yet. He's going to be on the guest. We're talking about how there's so much no code out there. And GitHub
GitHub.
has
Yes.
a new product that's joining out there where it's no code, and all you have to do is just say, "This is how I want my code to connect." Like you don't have to be a programmer. That is going to eliminate a
Wow.
lot of programming
Does
jobs.
this incorporate AI?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yes. And there is this barrier that you can put on over your code so that it doesn't become open source and accessible.
Wow.
So there's things that are in play. These were some of the topics we were discussing as it relates to how this is going to impact careers again.
Exactly. And I want to talk to you about that at a
Yeah.
later date,
Yeah.
whether on your show or my show, about how the chat GPTs and
You should have,
AI
yeah, I'm going to tell you.
is affecting the workplace.
Oh, Larry Roberts was a guest on my podcast.
Right.
Phenomenal guest. He talked about how that's being used in the podcast industry. There's also this place in education, which is very interesting. A lot of educators super afraid of it. I've seen on LinkedIn and in other, I'll say, conversational social channels where they are, educators are not as afraid of it as I thought. They're actually encouraging their students to use it and to then use it as a way that can demonstrate more responsibility, that they need to go and do research on top of it to make sure that chat is not giving them false information.
Good point.
Really important to know. Now, yesterday I was talking with a person. Name is not going to be disclosed. He's going to be on my podcast. So, building some suspense here. So,
Uh-oh.
people will listen to the Intern Whisperer.
Suspense.
Yeah. And we were talking about how open source, there is open source code. And then there is also another platform. And for the life of me, I wish I could think of it, but it's similar to ChatGPT. And it's being used in the world of coding. And it may still be that one. Anyway, not
GitHub.
HubSpot, GitHub is using it and has integrated it in there. So all a person has to do is start saying, hey, this is how I want like myself, I'm not a programmer. I can say, hey, I want my platform to connect this way, this way, this way. It can help even build out some of the AI code. This is a little frightening to me.
Wow.
Because there's a lot of people, programmers, that are front and back end. They may not be needed anymore because there's low code, and this has been out in the market for, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 years now. Low code or no code ability to build code.
Okay.
So that you do not have to be a programmer, which is front and back end and database.
Amazing.
Now, the people that were doing AI, when I started my company, Employers4Change, I'm going to stick with that name instead of the old name.
Correct.
I had students that were with me. I said, listen, you shouldn't be even bothering about some of these other programming languages that you've learned. Python is good, and so is CSS and HTML. Those are basics.
Sure.
But that's kind of like, do you know Google? Do you know Teams? Like, everybody should know those two types of products. They're like breathing. Whereas you may not know how to program using a machine learning or some type of natural language. These are important things for students to be studying now,
right,
so they can get those jobs. So I know I'm going to mention something else here. We've seen a lot of layoffs happening, right?
Yes, we have.
Like crazy.
Yes.
And companies, and one of my companies that was a guest, Kim Appelt, she's with Class. That company also experienced some layoffs. I just saw it yesterday happen. This is my prediction about what's going to happen in as we move into 2030. There will be way less jobs, entry-level jobs, way less, maybe even mid-level jobs. So everybody's going to have to learn how to be a contractor. And those are, if you're going to college, you need to make sure you're taking some basic electives in accounting, marketing, management, economics, statistics, all of those things. If you're not going the school route, you still need to make sure that you're picking up some of these classes.
Agreed.
Or knowledge, because you're going to have to be a contractor. And as a contractor, you need to know how to survive and how to sell. So you may not like selling, but what selling is about a relationship.
Exactly. At the end of the day, it's about relationships. I agree.
Yeah. And so you really listen to what the person is needing, and you're saying, well, I can help you solve these things. I can do, X, Y, and Z, if you will. Now, if you see it as more that you're helping to solve problems, you'll do better. And you don't try to think like the proverbial car salesman, which has a bad rap also. I don't think that they
Used
do that
car
anymore.
salesman.
Yeah, they don't.
Sure.
They don't. They're pretty good at listening now. But sales is just like this. How did you get your first boyfriend or girlfriend? How did you actually get your first job? You have to think like that. And when you do, you're able to overcome some of that, bad knowledge of what you think sales is, or a perception, because it's really just about a relationship. And if people will buy from you if they trust you and believe you, and that you're not there to force them to make a decision that they don't want.
Isabella, with so much technology out there and everyone's behind their device one way or another, I know Gen Zers, earlier we were having a conversation about Generation Z and how they're not the most approachable or social individuals.
You'll think that. They actually are one of the generations that really want a lot of mentoring.
Okay.
So the things that we have about the phones, I work out of Orlando Game Space, now OMG Labs, it's rebranded. One of the guys inside of there was wearing some goggles that can actually, you can just walk and he's throwing a ball down, and it looks very 3D like.
Oh, wow.
So I feel like, and I've seen people being able to take calls, they're testing all of these, and it's been out in the market for a while that they were going to have it so that you don't have to have a phone anymore. So get ready for that. That's going to be changing because
Right.
we've got problems with the rare minerals that are in phones, and we've got
Correct.
to solve that because that's just another area of pollution, but also another area that's running scarce. I'm
You
throwing a
talked
lot of
about,
stuff at you.
but
Sorry.
it's great stuff because it's leading from one, issue I like to talk to you about
Industries and
to another one.
jobs.
Right. And
Right.
speaking of industry and jobs and the workplace in 2030, diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah.
It seems to be under attack here in Florida.
Yes, it is. Our governor. I
What's
said it,
going
not
on?
you. You're
Oh,
fine.
I'm good with it. I talk about the governor all the time.
Okay.
Positive, negative, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What's going on? How what's happening here in Florida, which seems to be the test kitchen of conservative politics, modern conservative politics, and this attack on DEI and ESG and what what's going on?
So my understanding from what, and my dad will call me also and say, "Your governor." I said, "What can I tell you?" And he has these conversations. So my understanding is that the governor has decided that no, we don't want to try and bring any issues with what diversity, equity, and inclusion can mean. So now nobody can bring that up, and you're not even supposed to address it at all.
Right.
It's just like, how is that possible? What does the federal government have? We have protected classes of people, regardless of age, right? We know if you're over 40, you're protected. We also have the equal opportunity. We're supposed to be making sure that all people and nationalities, races are represented fairly.
Correct.
So even though every state can have their own take on it, we have to abide by, well, which court of law are we going to follow?
Exactly.
Every company wants to make sure that they are being inclusive. And we can see that what inclusion values they may have based on the pages on their website, right?
Sure.
The
Okay.
pictures that they take, how are they portraying what diversity and we'll just say inclusion looks like. Now, diversity and inclusion also means individuals with disabilities, and that
Correct.
falls under the protected classes there. And then we also have, when we talk about disabilities, it can be physical, mental, and emotional. But it is not just the things that we don't see, and you may not always see, like vision. A person has some type of a vision impairment,
Okay.
or that you can't see that a person is deaf, right?
Okay.
So you have to think about, well, are you inclusive? Now, inclusion can also mean personality types, because when we're looking at autism or somebody that might be on the spectrum of it, we'll think, gee, they seem a little odd. I don't know what's going on. When really, it's not that they're odd at all. There's a disability there.
Okay.
And that doesn't mean you wouldn't invite them. You can have somebody that has anxiety, right, as a disability. You could have somebody that is very introverted in their communication skills. Does that mean that they're not a good employee? So when the governor goes and says that we can't, we're throwing out the book on what diversity and inclusion should be and equity, that's obviously going against our constitutional rights that we have, or maybe it's not constitution, but definitely the federal government's criteria and the regulations that they have.
Right.
So I don't think he's thinking through things as what we should be building on, because America is built around being a melting pot, if you will. We've always heard that. We also know that what real diversity is what's in your head. So when I talk about what real diversity is, it doesn't have that external appearance. It's more of what are the cognitive skills that you have: research, time management, creativity, problem solving, critical thinking, and communication.
Mm-hmm.
If you're talking about those skills, those are universal to everybody, regardless of what race, color, gender, age you are, including anybody with disabilities.
Right.
Now, when we add just a few more things on that spectrum, and we look at what is a person's makeup, and you're considering hiring them, it should be built around a multidimensional approach to learning and what you want to see in your company. So when you mention Gen Z millennials, they care very much about causes. So do the other generations. It's just that they may not always speak up as much.
Okay.
So we all care about something, whether it's your faith or if it's art or it's about equal rights. And yours, all of what you and Joel are doing is all about having freedom.
Right.
And we're really taking away, I think, what our governor is doing is taking away rights to make sure that we are going to be a state and employers that are being equitable to the people that are here. Internationals, we'll throw them into the pool too. So
Okay.
people that are not citizens. So I personally, my preference when I look to hire are going to be not necessarily in this order: veterans, individuals that come from other countries that are not citizens, and individuals with disabilities.
Okay.
Because I find them to be probably the most appreciative of having a job, whether you're asking them to work on site or if you're asking them to work remotely. They will be very smart as a person that you may regard on the outside as, oh, they're the right race, ethnicity, they're the right gender, whatever. There's very few positions that I think should require some level of specificity, like a rape center, right? You might want to have more women working in there than men. So when we're, again, going back to this whole idea of what does real diversity look like, it should be everybody, no matter what. And I don't see how the governor could disagree with that.
I see the governor thinking that the free hand, the invisible hand of
The
the
invisible
market
hand.
will settle things, that everything will come out fine in the end. And if there is an employer that decides consciously or
Yes.
unconsciously not to be as diverse as the paying public anticipates or hopes for or wants, that that particular employer will not succeed.
Possibly, right? We know that can happen. But there is a lot of, and I can see why the governor might think that,
Right.
because we have social presence and everybody is on social feeds, right?
Sure.
They're giving some kind of review of a company, or they're saying,
Right.
oh, I had this experience with Isabella Johnston and it was awful and blah, blah, blah. They could go and
Right.
say those kind of things because we didn't used to have that ability to talk openly about a company or a person that had wronged us.
That's a good point. We are in a different age now
Yeah,
that
everything is
so
online.
transparent.
And it's transparent.
Right.
And so people now are also way more enlightened. The expectation of millennials and Gen Z, and it's going to be Gen Alpha that's right after them,
Okay.
their expectation is that life should be more fair and it should be more equitable to everybody. And when we had during COVID the death of George Floyd,
Sure.
that was just rampant around the world. Kind of died down a little bit,
Of course.
but it did change things. And I feel like the movement is still there, but just not as
as fervent, as
Yeah.
energized.
Energized. I
perhaps.
think that's the best
Right.
word. Yeah, because there was a lot of anger and a lot of sadness around it.
There is a lot of anger. I believe there's a lot of pushback also.
I think it was about as just about as big as the death of Martin Luther King Jr.
I wasn't alive then. I did see, from the news clips, the,
It was a
the
big deal.
pushback, the rioting. I followed.
Yeah.
I followed Martin Luther King.
Yeah, I mean, it's
growing up.
historical. You can find a road named after him everywhere, right?
That's right. Exactly. I'm not too sure you'll find a road named after George Floyd.
I'm sure there is, but
and
yeah.
True.
Not the same way,
Honorary.
though. Yeah.
However, I don't see the impact of the death of George Floyd
In the same way.
in the same way.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll see a generation 2 or 3 later,
Mm.
as we see a generation later, two
Remembering him.
generations remembering him and going back to,
Well, their lives
specific
were different though,
words.
right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. It did heighten the disparities
Yes.
and the injustices that are occurring. However, the energy.
Yeah.
I protested the Gulf Wars. I protested with ACT UP. I protested the building of a incinerator on the southeast
Mm.
side of Chicago because it would contribute to more medical concerns of the residents in that area. I've been there. I've done that, and I remember having that energy. Am I too old to do it now? I've got a lot of things, and that I'm
Well, you
juggling.
can also support it in different ways, like through your podcast.
That's true. That's true. But I want to give energy to causes that are sustaining
Mm-hmm.
and
And
see
so
the
we should be talking
sacrifice.
about transportation. We should be talking about our environment for sure,
Hmm.
and water. There's only so much water that we have, and
That's true.
the size of our population, it's still escalating. Like, where are we all going to be? Where does our food come from? What are these
Mhm.
things? So there's a really good series that's on Netflix, and it's called The Future of.
Okay.
And what I like about it, I highly recommend everybody watch it. It's
The
not as
future of.
terrifying as Black Mirror. And by the way, Black Mirror is getting another season 6
Yes.
coming out.
Yes. Yes.
So scary. So scary. But The Future of does probably a better balance of what that future could be in the 30 minutes that they give you, or 45 minutes in those episodes.
Mhm.
They talk about human composting. Well, if you don't know what that is, it's legal in New York. You need to know.
Yeah.
And they'll talk about how robots are being used, everything in life. And they talk about whatever
food.
AR, VR, they're talking about all of these things and how that is impacting our life in the future, and how food will be grown in labs, and you'll
Mhm.
just go to your little, let's call it a microwave, but your food preparer, and then you'll pick, oh, I want a hamburger, and then it's going to take some cells and it's going to grow you a hamburger in like seconds, and that's what you're going to eat.
Oh yeah.
So there won't be as many animals that we're obviously using to produce food. We can grow it. We will grow it in our house. Even the houses will be having more plants, and you'll have to hire on the outside of it, and you'll have to hire a botanist to actually help you keep your home in check.
Wow.
And they're talking about how they can take, when somebody passes away, instead of having their presence on social feeds, you can actually use AR. You can upload
Replica.
that consciousness, or that
Yes.
twin, or that person who they were, into the DNA of plants.
Unbelievable.
And then I'm going, but what
Wow.
happens when the plant dies? Like, where does that? So it's kind of a bit like Avatar in a way. Like, where does that collective knowledge go? So
Right.
this stretches things in a totally different way, but it's not as scary as Black Mirror. So
Wow.
yeah.
I have
So
to,
when we talk about the future
of.
the future of, it's on Netflix.
Wow.
Yeah.
I want to talk about, before we wrap up, I want to talk about in diversity,
Mhm.
equity, and inclusion. We talked about the diversity and inclusion part, the equity piece. Are we talking about the same demographics, but
Yeah.
more from the perspective of men and women in the same workplace?
Actually, in so many places, not just men and women, it's also, you still see it in race. So equity can usually be seen in the form of the amount of money that you get paid
Mhm.
for a
Okay.
position. Now, there's a lot of states, and I'm sure you know this, California is one of them. They let it as, no, everybody needs to start putting what the pay range is, so people can make decisions. What is the bottom? What is the highest that you can make? So that you're being more transparent with it. That's a good thing. I think everybody should do that, regardless. They have to do it in government, right?
Right.
Because it's our federal dollars paying for that.
That's true.
Anything in our, whether it's federal or state, you have to be very transparent. Nonprofits are pretty good about doing it too, because
Okay.
there's a lot of transparency in budgets with nonprofits. It's for profit that doesn't seem to play by those same rules. So I really feel like transparency in pay would be a great thing, because then men and women, and you can't be discriminated against even in the race side.
Right.
So what I believe is going to happen in this place of equity is that our cognitive skills are going to become the currency that people are looking for.
Wow.
And so where are you on a scale of 1 to 5 on your
Thank you.
problem solving? Where are you on a scale of 1 to 5 in your communication skills? And so that's what we track in Employers for Change. We track those variables so that we can see those cognitive skills. They're the basics of what we take into any situation, whether you're moving up or you're moving lateral across your department or you're changing into another industry. So I feel like those skills will be how we begin to differentiate, and what
Correct.
real equity should look like is based on not college. Doesn't have to be that you went there.
That's
May
true.
not be certificates,
True.
but it is really how can you solve problems? What can you take off of your shoulders? If I was coming to work with you, one of the questions that I always use for anybody who wants to work with me is, what can you take off of my shoulders?
Thank you.
When I ask that question, I will know if they have researched me, my company,
Exactly.
what their communication skills are, and if they can identify what my problems are.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. And I like that approach.
Yeah.
We had a young person here earlier who wants to intern for us, and it was good to hear that, oh yeah, I already follow you on social media. It's like,
Mhm.
that's a good start. And asking pointed questions. What are you want? What are you looking for out of this experience, et cetera, et cetera. But going even further, like you just said, what problem are you able to at least start looking for a solution to take off my shoulders? My job is to keep,
Yeah.
when I worked in the private sector and in the public sector, I learned early that my job was to keep my boss's desk clean. And when I was a manager, it was my subordinate's job to keep my desk clean.
Mhm.
And it's not that difficult. It's not that difficult. And when I do talk to people, sometimes it takes more than just
Mhm.
that initial conversation, that the interview or whatever, several conversations
Mhm.
to get to what exactly you were talking about.
So let's add one more thing to the idea of equity. Equity can also be seen in not just your skills and what you bring to the table, and not just in currency, but equity can also be in a relationship, because you
Mhm.
mentioned that you have an intern and that you were interviewing them.
Mhm.
And so equity is about this relationship that you have with people. Are you treating them as we'll say an equal, in the sense of they're a human,
Right, right.
And even if it's an unpaid internship, realize that they want a relationship with us.
Mhm.
And that's super important to remember.
Exactly.
We're made for relationship as humans. And there's a spiritual girl, the Jesus girl in me will say, yeah, we're made for relationship. We are here to serve others,
Correct.
and we are here to have others serve us. So it's not just the one-way street. Yeah.
Wow.
So I think equity is inclusive of the fact that we need to remember this is a relationship.
Exactly. It all starts with building those relationships.
Yeah.
You're right.
Trust.
Mhm.
Yeah, everything.
Before we wrap up, I'm going to turn
Okay.
the tables on you.
Ooh, okay.
Tell us 3 things about yourself that
Go ahead, keep
that
going.
best explain you or that we don't know about.
Okay. Well, I'm going to do the best explains me is continuous learner. I'm going to hyphenate that. So that's one of the things. I really believe that no matter who we are all interns in life. No matter how much experience or how old you are, you are an intern in life. So stay in a place of continuous learning. That would
Excellent.
be my first word that I would pick. The second word is I'm extremely relational. I tell that to people all the time, because I also want to have a relationship with the people that I work with. I want to have a relationship with my customers, and I want to have a relationship with my vendors that are outside. That's really
Right.
what I look for. And then the third word, this is so important to me, is communication. As much as I would love to believe I'm a 5 in communication, I don't think very many people really are. Because I think that to be a good communicator, I think I'm a 4.5.
Okay.
I work really hard to stay there too, and do better. I think that a good communicator understands that you have to be an active listener,
That's correct.
meaning like you're not on your phone and sometimes I'm on my phone, but I'm telling them I am really listening.
Correct.
And
It
are you?
happens.
I mean,
We,
yeah,
we lead
maybe.
busy lives.
Yeah. But if you're really going to be an active listener, you're going to put the phone down. The second part of being a good communicator is the ability to write well.
Hmm.
Maybe using Grammarly, maybe you're using, Chat GPT to write things. That's
Right.
all good. But you yourself need to have a good knowledge of how to write well, we'll say well,
Sure.
and go back and proofread your own work. And you'll still find mistakes even after you've done that. The third part of being a good communicator is verbal skills. And then the last part of being a good communicator is, to me, is the vision side. So when you're on, and John Chen and I were talking about that, when we were on the podcast together, it's really important to remember the more of your senses that you use on a podcast, we're in the same room, so we can look at each other, but we
Correct.
can also look away, right? And when you're on a podcast, you have to sit in the same seat. Or, I mean, sorry, on a Zoom call, you have to sit in the same seat. But what if you were able to sit here and be able to be using more of your senses? Many of us turn those cameras off because we're over here doing work,
Right.
and we don't want somebody to see it. Now, if you wouldn't do that in a meeting sitting in the room, then you don't do it on a Zoom call.
Right. That's true.
Right.
That's true.
And you want to make sure that you can also pick up on body language and the
Mhm.
cues that's going on. Because if somebody is over here and they have their phone under the table, you can tell, well, they're not looking.
Right.
And I can tell something's going on, right?
Right.
And I went away from the mic there. So being able to be cognitive of the body language, you can still pick up some of those nuances
Okay.
online.
Right.
So communication is visual, it is auditory, it is listening, and it is written. And even on the visual side and on the auditory, you're able to pick up some nuances, I think, about just what's going on in that person's life,
Wow.
you know? And that can be more helpful to be a person that accurately communicates well. So when people work with me, my interns work with me, and what I teach my employers is you want to make sure that you have your cameras on.
Right.
You want to make sure that you are investing in time in them, because that's what we want as a relationship with people. It's not a transaction. You also want to make sure that you are being a part of these conversations that are hard conversations to have.
That's true.
You know, all of these, there's so many things in there. And if we use the who, what, why, where, when, how, we're going to have better communication between the people that we engage with every day, no matter who they are.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Wow, Isabella.
So those are my 3 words, and that's why communication is my most highest skill need. I tell people that is my most highest need. So communicate with me frequently is not because I'm demanding that. It's because that is where I'm wanting to make sure that we have a relationship here and that it's constant.
Right. And it's hard for the others to get into that frame of mind.
Yeah. And make
Even
sure,
though they
yeah.
are conscious about it, but making the time and following through. I know
Okay.
I've been there.
You have other questions you're going to throw at me?
That
was it? I
That
like
was
it.
it.
Yeah.
That was it. I really appreciate you being here, Isabella.
Thank you.
Where can our listeners and our viewers find you on the internet?
So if you want to connect with me, I am most active on LinkedIn. So look for me as Isabella Johnston. I've got a black and white jacket on, so you'll at least have the right one.
We'll put the link in
Thank you.
the description of the podcast of today's episode.
I appreciate that.
Sure.
The other way that you can reach me is through our Employers4Change website. That is www.e4c, the number 4c.tech, T-E-C-H. You can check us out there, but there's also a way you can connect with me on that site.
And there's the Intern Whisperer.
The Intern Whisperer.
Make sure you check that out.
Follow us, subscribe to us,
like, share,
help us reach 20,000 downloads. We are doing some competitions, and we also have an intern pursuit game on Steam. We're
That's
looking
right.
for more people to engage with that. That's certainly a lot of fun. It's kind of like Guardians of the Galaxy, but fun.
Okay.
And we have adult coloring books, we have green screens, we have all kinds of stuff to give out to people that
Awesome.
engage with us.
Well, thank you, Isabella. I really appreciate it. I want to do this again.
Yeah, me too.
And I hope you enjoyed yourself.
I did. Thanks, John. Good job.
Thank you, John. This is the David Washington Show here at the Oxford. Please like, share, hit the notification bell, let everyone know. And please visit the Intern Whisperer. Take care.
Bye-bye.